The Last Word with Lawrence O'Donnell starts right now. Hey, Lawrence.
Thanks, Jen. We have Andrew Weissman joining us tonight on the Epstein files and the fact that a judge is going to consider tomorrow what to do about the fact that they've only released less than 1% of the Epstein files. And he's also going to tell us about what people in the streets in Minnesota should be thinking, what their rights are in any situation involving ICE as they are approached on the streets there.
That's incredibly important advice, and I'll be looking forward to hearing what he has to say about the Epstein files, too. Now, a lot of people are wondering.
We're going to get right to it. Thanks, Jen.
Bye, Lawrence.
Thank you. Well, today, Donald Trump, who never gives up on a lost election, finally got possession of the Nobel Prize, the Peace Prize, even though he didn't come close to winning it. In a visit to the White House today, Venezuelan opposition leader Maria Corina Machado gave her Nobel Peace Prize to Donald Trump, just handed it over. And Donald Trump, who thinks he is the acting president of Venezuela, took it. Maria Corina Machado has been publicly insulted by Donald Trump since his attack on Venezuela. She has, of course, been publicly worshipful of Donald Trump, as worshipful as possible, but it isn't working. Donald Trump is supporting her enemies now in Venezuela, which means Donald Trump is supporting the enemies of democracy in Venezuela. And Maria Machado has made the so far losing bet that she can take her place at the top of a democratically elected government in Venezuela simply by charming Donald Trump. And so now Donald Trump has her Nobel Peace Prize, and she has nothing. After Donald Trump is out of power, or possibly even before that, Maria Machado will spend the rest of her life explaining that she always knew Donald Trump was an imperialist fool, but she was just trying to deal with him to save Venezuela from his madness. She'll be saying that for the rest of his life, for the rest of her life. Because Donald Trump is because of his insane pursuit of the Nobel Prize, truly insane pursuit of the Nobel Peace Prize, which he now technically has in his possession. The Nobel Committee was forced to issue a statement saying once a Nobel Prize is announced, it cannot be revoked, shared, or transferred to others. The decision is final and stands for all time. That's what the child in the White House was doing today, while Minnesota was wondering if the child in the White House would send his next invasion force in their direction. And so it has come to this: a Democratic governor asking Republican Donald Trump directly not to attack his state. Donald Trump treats states that didn't vote for him as foreign countries. And he might or might not use the military to invade any one of them at any moment. And so this morning, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz released a written statement, not a video statement, a written statement to try to take the temperature down, a direct appeal to Donald Trump. The governor said, quote, "I am making a direct appeal to the president. Let's turn the temperature down, stop this campaign of retribution. This is not who we are." And an appeal to Minnesotans. I know this is scary. We must speak out loudly, urgently, but also peacefully. We cannot fan the flames of chaos. That's what he wants. That's what he wants. A governor accurately, honestly saying that a president of the United States wants violence in his state. Donald Trump has made the foolish mistake many times of thinking what he wants is what America wants. He made that mistake with his illegal and unconstitutional Trump tariffs that are opposed by most Americans, with most Americans fully understanding that it is Americans and only Americans who actually pay the Trump tariffs. And Donald Trump has made the mistake of thinking what he wants to see in Minnesota is what Americans want to see. A new CNN poll shows that only 26% of Americans say the killing of Renee Good last week by ICE agent Jonathan Ross was an appropriate use of force. Only 26% 56% think what Donald Trump and J.D. Vance have been telling them to think about that killing. A substantial majority thinks the killing of Renee Good was an inappropriate use of force. Fully 56% of Americans say that Jonathan Ross's decision to shoot and kill Renee Good was an inappropriate use of force. And those 56% of Americans are completely right. They have seen the video and they know what they've seen. Those 56% of Americans believe what they see with their own eyes and not what Donald Trump tells them to see. 51% say that the killing of Renee Good reflects bigger problems with the way that ICE is operating. A majority of Americans say that ICE enforcement actions are making the country less safe. 51% say that ICE enforcement actions are making cities less safe, and only 31% think that ICE enforcement actions are making cities safer. So Donald Trump and Stephen Miller, with congressional elections approaching, are appealing to 26% of voters when they defend the killing of Renee Good. Donald Trump, Stephen Miller, and the Republicans in the Congress have 31% support, as of yesterday anyway, for what ICE is doing in their invasions of our cities. The delusional 79-year-old man in the White House who now believes he's the acting president of Venezuela does not have the support of his own country for the invasion of Venezuela. And he does not have the support in this country for his invasion of Minneapolis or any other American city. And so, with the current support of 31% of Americans, Donald Trump at 8:04 a.m. this morning wrote lies on social media about Minnesota's governor and other elected officials in Minnesota and wrapped this threat into those lies. I will institute the Insurrection Act, which many presidents have done before me, and quickly put an end to the travesty that is taking place in that once great state. America doesn't want to see Donald Trump send troops to Minnesota. Donald Trump has only 31% support for what he's already done in Minnesota, and sending the army to Minnesota is going to decrease Donald Trump's very, very low support. The Insurrection Act first became law in 1792 and was amended in 1807. It gives the president the power to deploy the American military within the United States under certain conditions, usually at the request of a governor. The Insurrection Act was last invoked in 1992, when the Republican governor of California, Pete Wilson, asked the Republican president, George H.W. Bush, for military aid after riots broke out in Los Angeles, when Los Angeles police officers were acquitted in the first trial they faced for the near-death beating of Rodney King, which was the first police misconduct in America captured on a private citizen's video camera. The Brennan Center for Justice points out, quote, "While there are rare circumstances in which such authority might be necessary, the law, which has not been meaningfully updated in over 150 years, is dangerously overbroad and ripe for abuse." Last night, an ICE agent shot a Venezuelan man in the leg while trying to apprehend him in Minneapolis. The Department of Homeland Security spokesperson said the man, quote, "began to resist and violently assault the officer." The former deputy director of the FBI, Andrew McCabe, had this reaction.
They have no credibility in terms of the way that they are talking about and characterizing the people involved in these events. They absolutely mischaracterized, deliberately mischaracterized Ms. Good and her partner as terrorists. They are not terrorists. They didn't commit any act of terrorism. They haven't been alleged to have committed a crime with an indictment or anything like that. So we know that we can't trust what the government is saying about what's happening on the ground. So now you think about what happened last night, and we essentially know nothing at this point. So it's really hard to evaluate.
First, he pardoned them, and then did he hire them? The top Democrat on the House Judiciary Committee, Jamie Raskin, is investigating how many of the January 6th criminal rioters who were pardoned by Donald Trump are now working in the federal government, and how many of them are working as ICE agents right now, tonight. The top Democrat on the House Judiciary Committee, Jamie Raskin, is asking the Justice Department and the Department of Homeland Security, quote, how many pardoned January 6th insurrectionists have been hired by your respective departments. We know that several participants in the January 6, 2021 attack on the U.S. Capitol have been rewarded with high-ranking positions in the Department of Justice. However, it remains unclear how many more have been invited to join the ranks of this administration, including among the masked Department of Homeland Security agents and officers that have dragged, tackled, beaten, tased, shot, and killed citizens and non-citizens alike in communities across the country. On January 6, 2021, Jared Wise, then a former supervisory special agent with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, stormed his way into the Capitol building. As he did so, he taunted and threatened police officers defending the building and the ones inside, screaming, "You guys are disgusting. I'm former law enforcement. You're disgusting. You are the Nazi. You are the Gestapo. You can't see it. Shame on you, shame on you, shame on you." Mr. Wise goaded and cheered on other rioters who were beating police officers, repeatedly chanting, "Yeah, F them, yeah, kill them." Mr. Wise has never expressed remorse or contrition for his criminal actions. When President Trump issued his blanket pardon on January 6th rioters, Mr. Wise escaped accountability for 2 pending felony charges: civil disorder and assaulting, resisting, or impeding officers, as well as 4 other offenses, including unlawfully entering the Capitol. All these charges were dismissed when President Trump pardoned Mr. Wise and nearly 1,600 other rioters, including hundreds of cop beaters, on his first day in office. Today, Mr. Wise serves as senior advisor in the Office of the Deputy Attorney General, alongside another January 6th participant, Ed Martin, the U.S. pardon attorney and head of the DOJ Weaponizations Working Group. None of this was possible in America until Donald Trump became president of the United States. Leading off our discussion tonight is Andrew Weissmann, former FBI general counsel and an MS Now legal analyst. And Andrew, I want to begin with exactly where we ended there, what has happened to the Department of Justice, where you once served. And we now have Congress asking the question, how many pardoned January 6th rioters are working in the Department of Justice? And we actually know about some already who were there, like the one Jamie Raskin described. But such an inconceivable question to ever ask in any prior history of the department before Donald Trump.
It is inconceivable. That is the world that we are living in. And normally, to work in the federal government, let alone the Department of Justice, it would help not to have a felony, a recent felony that included the events on January 6th. And just remember that even if you are pardoned, that does not get rid of the facts of what you did. That does not get rid of the case. Judge Tanya Chutkan made that point, saying that nothing about the pardoning of everyone on January 6th erased what happened. In very wonderful language that I can't do justice to, the sort of the scar and the stain of that day. Well, those people, no matter what the president has said, have still done that. The Department of Justice, of all places, is not where you hire those particular types of felons. It's not like they did their time and they've expressed remorse and there's some second chance opportunity. I also don't understand how they could possibly get clearance to have access to the kinds of information that you have. I mean, just remember how much awesome power a prosecutor has. You know, you were talking about ICE agents on the ground. Well, also, you know, prosecutors behind a desk have different, but similar power in terms of how it can affect you. The lack of judgment and the way in which that just embodies the corruption that is going on at all levels of this government.
So one more point about this. On Justice Department forms for hiring, there's a variety of questions you can ask. You can ask, have you ever been arrested? You can ask, have you ever been convicted of a crime? And when you're pardoned, you are still someone who has been arrested. If you've been pardoned and you're asked on a form, have you been arrested? You have to answer yes. And if these people didn't, they've committed a crime in filling out that federal form.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's no question that this comes up. And there's no question that in any normal time, you have questions about all sorts of aspects that relate to your conviction. The pardon doesn't change that. And so you have to remember the president's view that also included Émile Beauvais' view was that January 6th and all of these prosecutions were a grave injustice, that they were ever held to account for what we all saw with our eyes on January 6th.
Andrew, the possibility of troops flooding the streets of Minneapolis now is very much a possibility. What do you make of the Insurrection Act and how we might see it used here?
Lawrence, you just talked about something that was unthinkable. I just want to make sure before I give a legal answer, what we're talking about here is a civilian, a woman in a car was shot to death by an ICE agent, and the president of the United States and the vice president, without any investigation, say it's her fault and want to open an investigation into her and her widow. And they want to have no investigation of the agent. And people are rightfully upset at that. Why shouldn't they be? And now they're going to, or at least they're talking about invoking the Insurrection Act, which would send in the military into a state of the United States. I mean, that's what we're talking about, the military going into a blue state in this situation where people have every right to expect a independent and thorough investigation. The Insurrection Act is a statute that gives the president a lot of leeway, not complete leeway, but a lot of leeway to invoke it based on various thresholds. But it is one where the courts will certainly be involved, but there's not a lot of flexibility that the courts have if those prerequisites are met. So I really think this is one where people need to react less in terms of the legality and more in terms of, good policy. I mean, is this something that we want to see in America?
Andrew, I'd like to squeeze in a quick break here. When we come back, I want to ask you about the Epstein files, what might happen in court tomorrow on that. We'll be right back with Andrew Weissmann. Tomorrow is the deadline for Donald Trump's Justice Department to explain to federal judge Paul Engelmeyer why they are in violation of the Epstein Files Transparency Act, the law that required the Justice Department to hand over all of the Epstein files to the House of Representatives 26 days ago. The Trump-controlled Justice Department has handed over less than 1% of the Epstein files in the Justice Department's custody. But there are more Epstein files that might not be in the Justice Department's custody, and the top Democrat on the Senate Finance Committee knows where to find them. The Senate Finance Committee has jurisdiction over the United States Treasury, which gives the Finance Committee authority to examine Treasury Department files. And that is exactly what the top Democrat on the Finance Committee, Ron Wyden, has been doing. Senator Wyden will once again become chairman of the Finance Committee next year if the Democrats win the Senate elections this year. Today, in a letter to a New York bank, Senator Wyden revealed Democratic and Republican staff of the Senate Finance Committee conducted an in-camera review of thousands of pages of Treasury Department files documenting the flow of money through Jeffrey Epstein's accounts. The letter was to Robin Vince, the chief executive officer of Bank of New York Mellon. Robin Vince joined the bank from Goldman Sachs the year after Jeffrey Epstein died in prison, so he had nothing to do with the massive transfers of money by Jeffrey Epstein through the Bank of New York Mellon that he now runs. Here's an example of the transfers Senator Wyden wants to know about just for the year 2007. 18 transfers of exactly $1 million each, beginning on January 11th of that year through September 26th of that year. That's just 1 year. Senator Wyden's letter says these transactions all occurred within a short period of time and had patterns indicative of potential money laundering. The Treasury Department and other financial regulators have regularly put out guidance to banks that large round dollar transactions, repetitive transactions, and circuitous money movements are highly suspicious. Senator Wyden is now demanding all of the suspicious activity reports filed by the bank or were supposed to be filed by the bank with the Treasury Department as required by law. Senator Wyden's letter says this raises serious concerns that BNY may have violated federal anti-money laundering laws that require financial institutions to conduct due diligence on customer relationships and report suspicious activity to the United States government in a timely fashion. Epstein was moving enormous sums of money around the globe to traffic women and girls, and BNY was well positioned to blow the whistle. BNY may also have broken the law by waiting years to report Epstein's suspicious transactions to U.S. regulators. So it is now up to Bank of New York Mellon CEO Robin Vince to decide how he wants to play his part in the Epstein files story. Will he do what Donald Trump would want him to do and release no information or 1% of the information the bank has about Jeffrey Epstein? We saw some corporate courage this week when Donald Trump visited a Ford factory. The courage did not come from the CEO or any of the high-ranking executives surrounding Donald Trump. The courage came from an auto worker on the factory floor, TJ Sabula, who called Donald Trump a pedophile protector as Donald Trump walked by, thereby provoking the childish rage of Donald Trump and an exhibition of Donald Trump's very small middle finger aimed at TJ Sabula. TJ Sabula told the Washington Post, "I don't feel as though fate looks upon you often, and when it does, you better be ready to seize the opportunity. And today I think I did that." Fate is now looking upon Robin Vince, the CEO of a bank that intentionally or unintentionally helped Jeffrey Epstein run $1 billion sex trafficking conspiracy for decades. Robin Vince had nothing to do with that, but now he does. Will he turn over his bank's portion of the Epstein files? Or will he live in fear of Donald Trump's middle finger like most corporate executives? Will the bank CEO have the courage of a factory worker like TJ Sabula? Andrew Weissmann is still with us. Andrew, this pursuit of this angle on the Epstein files is something that Senator Wyden at the Finance Committee has been uniquely powered to do and has been pursuing for years. And when you see that money laid out there, and they obviously have much more that they've developed. They didn't put it all in that letter. There's really quite a story being told in that flow of money.
Well, absolutely. I mean, I'm not the first to say, follow the money. And here, there's so many reasons to do that. Yes, there could be the issue of whether people at a particular bank are complicit. But even if they're not, just remember, they do have requirements to know their customer. They're supposed to know basic information about sort of why a transaction and a suspicious transaction is being conducted, so they're comfortable doing that. That's the anti-money laundering rules that you referred to. But even if the bank satisfies that, that's not the only reason to get this. You're trying to find out why is he doing this, and there leads to other people who are complicit. And this is one where, again, we do not have Congress acting in a way to actually discover information. We have them pressing for the depositions of former President Clinton and former Secretary of State Clinton, but the obvious people who could lead us to that information are not being called. You could call the prosecutors and the agents in the case to find out what they investigated. You could call Ghislaine Maxwell and put her to an actual, not just a cozy interview, but to questioning about those transactions. That's just some of the things that you could do to get at the truth of what has been done by the Department of Justice, what has not been done by the Department of Justice, and is there anyone out there who is complicit? That was the whole point of Congress passing this statute, and that is the reason that there's going to be this court proceeding before Judge Engelmeyer in New York.
And what bank officials like this have to know is that the Democrats are less than a year away now from real subpoena power in the House of Representatives. When they win the House of Representatives, all of this could be immediately put under subpoena there. And if Ron Wyden becomes chair of the Senate Finance Committee next year, then he has subpoena power there that he doesn't have as easily exercised now. And so as this goes on and as Democrats gain power in the Congress, this only gets worse for people out there who are trying to hide anything.
Absolutely. This is one where, yes, it is true that the judge in New York could force some material to be released. I have some real questions about whether he will, whether that's the right vehicle for doing this. There's no question that the Department of Justice is violating the statute. That's a given. I mean, there's no dispute about that. It's whether there really is, this is the right mechanism. I know that sounds very legalistic, but I'm a lawyer and so is the judge. But this is one where this is the kind of thing that eventually it will come out. And so the people who are sort of hiding it now, there really will be a point where they will rue this day, and we will be able to see whether and to what extent there is a cover-up of what is going on and a protection of anyone who is complicit.
We'll see what the judge says tomorrow. Andrew Weissmann, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Welcome.
Coming up today, in pretending to announce a Trump healthcare plan, Donald Trump proved that he has no healthcare plan after he and Republicans in Congress decided to rip health insurance away from millions of people who obtained their health insurance through Obamacare. That's next. Donald Trump, in his strange way, pretended to announce a health care plan today, now that millions of Americans have lost health insurance because Donald Trump took away the money provided by Obamacare to help those people pay their health insurance premiums. Here is the entirety of Donald Trump's health care plan as released on the White House website. Quote, "The government is going to pay the money directly to you. It goes to you, and then you take the money and buy your own health care." That is what Obamacare tax credits were doing. That was money that was enabling people to buy their own health insurance. Donald Trump doesn't know this, but a tax credit is money that is paid directly to you by the United States Treasury, and then you are able to use that money to help pay for your low-cost Obamacare health insurance. In Donald Trump's announcement of his no-plan healthcare plan, he also said, you go out and buy your own healthcare and you'll make a great deal and you'll get better healthcare for less money. So his plan is go out and buy your own healthcare. That's the Trump plan. In another line of the ludicrous statement claiming to be a healthcare plan, it says, it requires insurers to publish detailed information about how much of your money they're going to be paying out in claims versus how much they're taking in profits. Obamacare already did that, but of course Donald Trump doesn't know that. And Obamacare didn't just make them publish how they're spending the money, it controls how much money they are allowed to spend on administrative costs and wasteful advertising in health insurance companies. The ludicrous non-plan is an insult to the intelligence of everyone who is not a Republican member of Congress or working in the Trump White House. Nobel Prize-winning economist Paul Krugman wrote, Trump has repeatedly shown a visceral dislike for policies that serve the public good. He really hates bipartisanship because it won't allow him to flaunt his dominance and act like America's supreme leader. As with his performative claim that he would bring down grocery prices on day one, Trump somehow believes that his bluster and antics will solve his political problems. Well, voters are in no mood to get fooled again. In fact, the Cook Political Reports says the mood is this in their analysis of congressional campaigns, seeing, quote, shifting 18 ratings in favor of Democrats. 8 of these shifts are from the likely Democrat column into solid Democrat, as it becomes more obvious that these races are in no danger of becoming competitive in this environment. An additional 10 races move one step into a more favorable category for Democrats, leaving Republicans holding 14 out of 18 toss-up seats. Joining us now is Democratic Congressman Mark Pocan of Wisconsin. He is a member of the House Appropriations Committee. Congressman Pocan, thank you very much for joining us tonight. You can't call it a health care plan. Not only is it not written in legislative language, it'll never be written as a bill. There won't ever be a bill. I hate to break the suspense for you, but there won't ever be a bill introduced in the Senate or the House coming from anything that Donald Trump said today.
Now, remember in middle school when you had that assignment for a couple months and the night before you put something together and you never read the book? And, you know, that's what Donald Trump tried to do. He didn't quite get there. He has one page, one side only, with a bunch of platitudes, as you showed. And, you know, this guy's had 10 years to come up with a health care plan. Instead, they cut health care for 15 million people. They raised all of our rates in the process. And the best he could do was come up with that. And, you know, it's really embarrassing, but I don't know if Donald Trump gets embarrassed anymore.
You know, I certainly liked it a lot better when the Republican position simply was government shouldn't do this. They used to just say, we can't afford it, the government can't afford it, and we should not be intervening and interfering with the healthcare market. That's really their position. They've never wanted to do anything in this arena.
Well, there is a sentence or two on that page that essentially do say that. Talk about like health savings accounts, right? That if you're rich enough to afford health care, you should be able to. Well, duh, right? I mean, the whole idea behind Obamacare, that's why 24 million people got health insurance through it, is a lot of people were falling through the cracks in the system, and that made sure that those people had health care. And that's a good thing for society and certainly good for their families. But Donald Trump, again, you know, while everyone's paying too much for groceries and durable goods and their utilities and now their health care, he's got a $300 billion ballroom with lots of gold being built. He's just not connected to people in places like Wisconsin or pretty much anywhere in the country.
And the polling now is showing that the electorate is holding Donald Trump responsible for what they're going through economically.
Well, Trump's tariff taxes are clearly understood by people. We're paying more for groceries and durable goods directly because of those tariffs. We put a mailer out recently to a bunch of small businesses. I even had bars tell me their costs have gone up because of tariffs. Some of the bottles of liquor that they try to serve in drinks, much less companies that are manufacturers, and all their input items have gone up in cost. So people get that. And then the big ugly law, don't forget, raised our utility rates and our healthcare rates, and also 15 million people lost their healthcare through that. So people really are way smarter than Republicans think they are. We're seeing it in all the elections that we had, the special elections in the last year. And I think this November, we're going to see a really beautiful blue wave coming.
What the document today, if you can call it that, clearly indicates is that Donald Trump knows he's in trouble. Republicans are in trouble. He knows he has to say something. He doesn't realize that what he would really have to do is do something.
Well, today was the last day for filing for the Affordable Care Act. That's why he timed it with that today. But we know, I think the last I saw, at least 1.4 million fewer people signed up for it because of those increased rates, because of what Donald Trump did in the big ugly law. But I also have employers. Part of the ripple effect is insurance raised other people's rates to make up for the people that are going to go to the emergency room without insurance. So I had one employer tell me they got a 41% increase in their group plan for 2026. So that's all the byproduct of Donald Trump not giving a damn about people across the country. All he cares about is Donald Trump and Donald Trump's family. And that's why he wants a Mar-a-Lago in Washington, because he's got one in Florida, but he doesn't care about you and your family and what you're going through.
Congressman Mark Pocan, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Sure. Thank you.
And coming up, the Trump Justice Department is harassing even more veterans in Congress for telling service members they don't have to obey illegal orders. One of those members of Congress will join us next. Donald Trump's Justice Department continues to amplify the message that members of the American military are not required to follow illegal orders. That was the message delivered by members of Congress who are veterans of the intelligence services and the military in a video last year directed directly to members of the military, reminding them what they all learned in their training and in their military education. You do not have to follow illegal orders. The Trump Justice Department is now running childishly fake criminal investigations of those members of Congress who obviously did nothing illegal by publicly stating the law. Congresswoman Maggie Goodlander of New Hampshire, who appeared in the video, said this.
No matter the threats, I'm not backing down. It is sad, telling, and downright dangerous that simply stating a bedrock principle of American law caused the president, our commander-in-chief, to threaten violence against me and to weaponize the Department of Justice against me. I served at the Department of Justice. I know that federal prosecutors have more control over the life and liberty of the American people than any other peacetime force. I know that when these powers are used for good, they make us the more perfect union. And I know that when these awesome powers are abused, when they are used to punish political opponents, to seek retribution, to do a president's personal bidding, there's nothing more dangerous in this country. My message is clear. I took an oath to this Constitution, and I intend to keep it. I will never give up the ship.
Congressman Chris Deluzio of Pennsylvania is a Navy veteran. He graduated from the United States Naval Academy at Annapolis in 2006 and then served as a surface warfare officer and deployed to Iraq with an Army Civil Affairs unit. He appeared in that video last year and is now being investigated by the Trump Justice Department, with federal prosecutors now pretending that the law is not the law and that the First Amendment does not exist. Joining us now is Democratic Congressman Chris Deluzio of Pennsylvania. He's a member of the House Armed Services Committee. Congressman, thank you very much for joining us tonight. I'm sure this was not something you could possibly have imagined when you took your oath of office in Congress.
No, nor could it be something I would have imagined as a plebe at the Naval Academy when I first took the oath. But I believe, as I did then, this country is worth our efforts. And no draft dodging president like Donald Trump is going to intimidate me from doing the job that I was elected to do, period. And he and everyone else in this country ought to understand that there are members of Congress like me who understand our oaths and are not going to be bullied or intimidated by his administration.
Was it at Annapolis when you were first taught that you should not follow illegal orders?
Absolutely. And it's something you learn. In my case, at the Naval Academy where I trained, you learn it in boot camp or officer candidate school or ROTC, and then you train on it during your time in uniform. Commanders work with JAG lawyers to train their troops on this. It's a bedrock principle. And of course, no one can order our troops and compel our troops to follow illegal orders. Our troops have to follow legal orders. These are basic principles of law. And I'll remind your viewers, Pete Hegseth said the same thing many times. Pam Bondi put it in a legal briefing because it's the law. It's not a controversial thing that tells you, how out of bounds this administration is. They're willing to target me and other members of Congress who stated the law.
So if you committed a crime by saying something and what you said is on video, it would seem the investigation would be watch the video and then issue your indictment. What else could their investigation possibly involve at this point?
Yeah, who the heck knows? And I think you're getting right to the heart of the fact that this is an intimidation or harassment campaign by the executive branch against the legislative branch. It goes to the heart of separation of powers. It goes to this president's desire and those around him to shut up political rivals like me and others, and we're not going to be intimidated.
You're obviously from Western Pennsylvania. You're around Trump voters all the time. You have friends who are Trump voters, I'm sure. Is this your sense of what they voted for?
No. And look, I'm proud that I win in a tough district in Western Pennsylvania. Folks who may have voted for the president voted for me. It's how I win election. And I will tell you, people, things they talk about, cost of living, whether they can afford their life and whether the American dream is still real. If you're my age, I'm 41 or younger, you're now living in America where you don't expect to be better off than your parents. That is a failure of the American dream. That's what folks are most focused on, not the insane and crazy rumblings of this president who seems addicted to power and addicted to the idea that he can use that power to target his rivals.
Have you, among your constituents, been challenged about this?
I will tell you the overwhelming calls and emails and things coming to my office have been positive and supportive. I've talked to folks. I had a town hall not too long after this all first came out in the news and the president's threats against me and others. Folks are all overwhelmingly supportive. And I'm not just talking about Democrats, independents, Republicans, because I think people understand this is the law, and especially folks who served. They know what we get trained on in uniform. They know that we have to follow lawful orders from the most junior person on up, and that no one's ever going to force our troops or could force our troops to follow illegal ones.
Congressman Chris Deluzio, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having me on.
We'll be right back. Navy veteran, now Congressman Chris Deluzio, gets tonight's last word.